Hello everybody and welcome to another installment of my series of new player guides. We're taking a little bit of a break, but we are back, and I decided that with the release of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. we would take today to talk about Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, because I think that she gets a lot of benefits with the release of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think there's a lot of cards that are just going to be really helpful for her. So let's hop into it. Oh, let me fix this real quick. So right off the bat, we've got Natasha Romanoff. She is a 3 recovery alter ego with the shield and spy traits, and the ability Mission Prep, which is a response. After you play a preparation card, draw 1 card, limit once per phase, and she has 6 hand size and 9 hit points. So this is there is a version of Black Widow decks where you just stay in this form. You accrue some extra card advantage by playing a preparation every turn, and because preparations are a upgrade that just kind of sits in play, and for the most part I think are pretty much all actions. Let me just check that real quick for interrupts. Okay, so some of them do need hero stuff, and that's fine. In fact, one of the newer ones does need you to be in hero form, but for the most part there was a version of the deck circa 2020 where you could just stay in alter ego, and all the preparations that you had did not require you to be in hero form to use them. And I think we've grown a little bit past that. This is not the example deck that I'm going to show off when we get into everything is not going to dive into that exactly, but I do think that for such a simple design, just being able to stay in alter ego and never need to go to hero form is interesting. But let's get into her hero form because it kind of plays off of what we're already doing. It also cares about preparations, and that is Black Widow. She is a 2 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense hero with the Avenger and Spy trait, and she has Widowmaker, which is a response. After you trigger the ability of a preparation card you control, deal 1 damage to an enemy. So once again, just a way to take that theme and push it further. Now, instead of drawing a card, you're dealing a damage to an opponent. That can help to just sort of like break a tough. That can help to just get you that extra bit closer where you wanted to defeat this minion, but they have 5 health and you only put 4 damage on them. And yeah, just overall, just a cool design. Very basic. I'll say that in comparison to some other heroes that we've covered, whether it be the core set or whether it be from the X-Men waves or the Web Warrior wave, Sinister Motives, she, I would say, is pretty simple. I think that she leaves the door open for an awful lot to happen. There's a lot of nuances that can happen, and I think that she is the kind of hero that, having seen her in play, she definitely rewards people with a little bit more experience with the game. You understand how the trigger windows work and everything, and she just kind of can sit there and just be like, she can keep the game in control for you while in multiplayer the rest of the table can just go about their business. Additionally, she has 5 hand size and 9 hit points. But yeah, overall, good stat line, interesting preparation kind of hooks, and let's get into the cards in her kit. Hey, and real quick, while we are in the middle of all of these card discussions, I just want to remind you that if you are enjoying this discussion and you like card discussions, go listen to The Winning Hand. If you enjoy the Nemesis kit that we'll talk about in a little bit, you might enjoy Critical Encounters, great podcast. And then additionally, check out gameplay channels like Solo Marvel Champions or Ray Plays Games. But other than that, that is my recommendations. Let's get back to the cards. So first up, we've got Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes. He is a 4-cost ally with 2 thwart, 2 attack, 4 health, and he has the Avenger and Spy trait as well. And then reduce the cost to play Winter Soldier by 1 for each preparation card you control. So right off the bat, I love the fact that he can be, he can be free, but he's probably going to be cost 1, 2 on average, because it doesn't seem difficult for Black Widow to put out multiple copies or get out multiple preparations. So he's rarely ever going to cost 4. If you're playing him for 4, something happened and it's just not your time. Beyond that, I just think that he is a decent ally. He's not the first card I think of when I think of Black Widow, and he's not especially powerful. I guess if you can play him for 1 or 0, he's very powerful. But like for the most part, it's like you're not sitting there playing Black Widow hoping that you draw Winter Soldier. He's just a generically good ally. And yeah, other than that, there's nothing too much to write home about. Then we've got 2 copies of Dance of Death, which is a 3-cost event. Attack, hero action, make the following 3 attacks in order. Deal 1 damage to an enemy, deal 2 damage to an enemy, deal 3 damage to an enemy. So first of all, this does remind me that the scenario Black Widow has several cards that share the same name, and this is one of them. This is a treachery in the like White Widow, or I suppose we would know her as White Widow, but technically it's marked as a Black Widow scenario. But there's a card that shares the same name, shares the same kind of theming. It's not quite as demoralizing when you're playing it when the villain is doing it, because it will also deal 1 damage to a character, and then 2 damage to another character, and 3 damage to another character if you only have 1 character out. My understanding and the way that the rules have seemed to have been played out is you're not taking 6 damage yourself. You need to have it preys on people with multiple characters. This, on the other hand, you could just deal 6 damage to a person. And if you have some way, or 6 damage to a character, not one of the other players. Please don't throw these at the players. But I will say that if you have the ability to bump up the damage that an attack's doing, and I'm trying to think if there's a good example of that, or if that's just kind of like in theory you can do this. It's not an aggression card, so the first card that comes to mind is not doing that. Yeah, I don't, off the top of my dome, know if there is a way to necessarily bump this up. Probably is. There's probably something where it's just like if... Oh, yes, there are examples of if the character you're attacking is confused, deal additional damage. So that would be, is that Float Like a Butterfly? So yeah, this can suddenly bump it up to 2 damage, 3 damage, and 4 damage. All cool. Overall, I like this card. I think that in general, paying 3 to deal 6 is okay, but paying 3 to deal damage to multiple bodies is, I think, more appealing. And that just sort of like plays into, yes, you are getting a weaker version of an attack, but you're getting a weaker version of an attack with a lot of options, and that kind of open-ended nature of Black Widow can be very good. Obviously, if you're playing the deck where you are staying in Alter Ego, this is just an energy resource, but that's a different kind of game. That kind of a deck is an example of what you can do with Black Widow, but it's also something where it's like it's twisted the game so much that it's okay if that doesn't seem like recognizable to a new player. Like you're playing a different version of Marvel Champions at that point. So I'll try not to like use that as the bona fide example of Black Widow for the rest of the review. Then we've got 2 copies of Acrobatics, a 1-cost upgrade, attack preparation skill trait, and hero interrupt. When a boost card is turned face up, discard Acrobatics, cancel the boost icons on that card, deal 1 damage to the villain for each boost icon canceled this way. So I don't remember what the analog to the scenario one does. I think it probably just cancels out like an event you do or something and like deals some damage back to you. But either way, this is a card that I will say it's probably more than a dozen games of Black Widow. This is one that doesn't necessarily stand out. And I'm not a Black Widow like expert necessarily. I'm not someone that, like I said, I'm pretty sure I've broken a dozen games with Black Widow, but I'm not necessarily sure. It might as well just be the experience. But overall, I think this card is interesting because being able to cancel boost icons so that basically I'm defending for 2 and the villain is attacking for 2, I'm not going to take extra damage. Granted, there could be a boost icon, the boost ability, the star icon. So to do boost ability, that could affect you. Let's see here. I don't even know if this is going to be the learn to play. Yeah, so You got boost icons and star icon. So I wanted to make sure I got that straight. So yes, so you are just caring about the 3-digit symbols and not the star icon. And just being able to cancel those out and deal some additional damage to the villain. The guarantee of I might take 1 because I'm defending, but it's an attack for 3. So I know I'm going to take 1, but you've got that guarantee. You're not going to take 6 or something, or maybe not 6. You're not going to take 4. I can see the purpose of this card. It's just not one that has come in handy for me, but I think that guarantee of you know how the villain phase is going to play out to some extent. Any knowledge you can glean and any knowledge you can go into the villain phase with is going to be helpful to your overall game plan. And we've got 2 copies of Widow's Bite, a 1-cost upgrade, preparation tech again. Oh, I guess it's also important to say, like with all these preparations, either you're drawing a card with the alter ego or you're dealing additional damage with Black Widow. So that is something to keep in mind just with the evaluations. But with Widow's Bite, it is a hero response attack. After a minion enters play, discard Widow's Bite, deal 2 damage to that minion and stun it. So we will later talk about Prism Dust, which actually I can just pull it out here right now because I happen to have the deck that I'm currently ready to play with. So very similar to Prism Dust, except for Prism Dust is an aspect card and it does a confuse, but very similar. I think when you evaluate, it's really easy to evaluate Prism Dust to some extent because we already have Widow's Bite as an example. And while this isn't my favorite card, it certainly is a card that, well, one, it has been the subject of some contention because of how interrupt and response windows work, where and this is something that, this is part of the Discord. This is not a hill that I'm willing to die on, but there are certain players, especially people who are really ingrained into Black Widow, where if a quick strike minion comes into play, in theory, this should be able to deal 2 damage to them and stun them, preventing the quick strike. The rules, as I understand them, and this is coming from an update that I want to say was maybe in early 2024, so about a year ago, would say that the quick strike happens, then you deal the 2 damage, then you stun them. To me, that's just sort of splitting hairs. I get why, especially if that's the way you've been playing it, where you get to you get to basically blank out the quick strike. I get why that is something that's the way you've been playing it, and it's disappointing to find out that it's different. But in my mind, I kind of think that it all kind of balances out because yes, there's the quick strike attack, but you're also dealing 2 damage, you're preventing their next attack, and so that's just why I'm not concerned with it, but it is something to be aware of. If you run into a quick strike minion, the way that the rules are written thus far, they are going to deal the quick strike damage, then you're going to deal 2 damage, then you're going to stun them. This is all a lot of complicating information about a card that I think is a solid 7, 8 out of 10. Maybe is more than I would have intended to say about this if that ruling wasn't something that was a bit of a hot topic last year. And maybe I will try to track down, I think it was a D20 woodworking video that really went over this, just so that there's context to this entire little discussion I just threw out. And we've got a lot of 2 copies, which is kind of interesting. So we've got 2 copies of Covert Ops, a 3-cost event, thwart action. Important, it says just an action. Remove 4 threat from a scheme, confuse the villain. So this is just nice, one, because it's an action, so it's not something that is you're required to be in hero form. This is one of those cards that was really helpful to enable Black Widow to be able to stay as Natasha as long as possible, because you had cards like this that would allow you to remove scheme. And that's something to keep in mind, and just in general, is Natasha is a very good hero to just be in alter ego, and you can still do stuff. And there's cards out of the Gambit pack, which we won't be talking about today, but there's cards out of the Gambit pack, and I even think out of was it Jubilee had Disguise. There are cards that just allow you to sort of play the game in alter ego form, and happily we have Covert Ops. I like this card. I like the fact that it is kind of doing double duty. It's removing a significant amount of threat, and it's confusing the villain. So it's sort of setting the villain back several steps, and that can be really rewarding in multiplayer. It's less powerful because 4 threat kind of means something different, but in solo, that's like you've basically blanked like 5 turns, maybe even more than that. I'm not sure, but whatever. Cool card. I like it. I would say that it is. I would say on the top of the curve for her cards. I think it's a very good card. It's not a preparation, but I think that in general, it does a lot of work. And I think it's probably one of those cards that does a lot of work, but then also kind of goes as an unsung hero. Like, it's so good, but it's not the card you point to say, like, I won because of Covert Ops, but that might be why you won. We've got Grappling Hook, a 2-cost upgrade. Preparation Tech, Hero Interrupt. When you reveal a treachery, discard Grappling Hook, cancel the effects of that treachery and discard it. So notably, you are not going to grab another card. You're just outright saying, this is a treachery that we are just not going to worry about. And that's cool. Like, I think this might be my favorite card out of her deck, because anytime you can just say no to the encounter deck, it's just great. And this is a on theme in hero pack way to make sure that you do that. And most notably, say it again, you don't need to go get another card. That is so crucial, because there are so many other times where an effect like this happens, but what you're doing is you are canceling the effect and then discarding it and then drawing a new encounter card. And that's just not happening here. And I'm now thinking that maybe there was a card that came out, Intelligence, that I should have included, and I didn't because I was kind of looking at it from a solo perspective. But that card allows you to, when you draw an encounter card, you can look at all the encounter cards that have been dealt out and the top card of the encounter deck. And if you could basically Grappling Hook so that you can say, this is a treachery, I'm going to grab that, I'm going to Grappling Hook it away, all the better. So, we'll talk about that deck in a little bit, but maybe just keep that in mind as a card that if you have the shield box is also something to maybe consider, because it combos really well. And we've got 2 copies of Black Widow's Gauntlet, a 1-cost upgrade, Tech, resource, exhaust Widow's Gauntlet, generate a wild resource for preparation card. So this is just great because it is a non-hero resource. Run into that a few times with other heroes, and it does exactly what you want it to do. It's nice to have a cheap upgrade, and yes, it is particular to preparations, but you're playing so many preparations. Preparations are the name of the game, that this is just going to be a great thing to do. If you have it in your opening hand, you should probably consider playing it. If you want a hard mulligan for it, they're not unique, so try to get both of them, and they will do they will do work for you. They will make it so that your preparations are not only drawing you a card and dealing damage, but also are not costing you cards in your hand, and that's just great. Then we've got Safe House, a 1-cost support, location shield. It is an alter ego action. Exhaust Safe House 29 and choose a preparation card in your discard pile. Add that card to your hand. This is a card that very easily combos with counterintelligence and very much allows you to just stay in alter ego. This might be my favorite alter ego action card in the game. I am just somebody who does not value alter ego actions, but this one is top tier. I'm reconsidering. This might be my favorite card in the pack. I liked Grappling Hook, but this is just so incredible that it's hard to not take it seriously. And just being able to have preparations leave play and just get them right back to your hand is great. You're going to draw a card. You've already dealt the damage, what have you. You're accruing so much value, and then you can just recur a preparation card. Especially, like I said, counterintelligence is a good example where you basically make it so that the villain just never puts any threat on the main scheme, or it's such a minimal amount of threat on the main scheme that it's kind of you just have the game in control. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about this card. I think it's incredible. I think it's very deceiving. Until you really click into what preparation cards you want to recur, you might not necessarily see the power of this, but it is a very good card. And last, we have the Synth-Suit, which is a 3-cost upgrade, armor, tech. Black Widow gets +1 defense, so that would give her 3 defense total. And hero response: after you trigger the ability of a preparation card, exhaust a preparation card you control, exhaust Synth-Suit ready Black Widow. Pretty meat and potatoes. We've seen a lot of cards like this before. I'm not going to pretend like it's super interesting, super dynamic, but it does what you want to do. It's already playing into exactly what you want to do. You want to play with preparations, and it's readying up your hero, which I don't put a lot. I mean, granted, she has 2/2/2 stats, and I guess so this we each have 2/2/3 stats. I don't put a lot of weight on using Black Widow for her basic powers, but I mean, frankly, that's kind of just an oversight. Like, you can do so much with Black Widow that whatever she can do with her basic powers is just sort of like a nice addition, and this just allows you to get something out of that. And there's plenty of things that Black Widow can do with her natural talents. So easy card to include, easy card to include. You had to include it. It's easy card to play. It helps you, and it's gonna do good work for you. But now let's go look at the example deck, and then we'll come back to look at the Obligation and Nemesis kit. All right, and here we are talking about the deck that I developed called the Old Guard with New Tricks, playing off, old dog, new tricks. And it is part of the 4-pack challenge, which is just something that, oh God, I'm forgetting the user's name, Abysmal. They kind of in response to my new player guides, where I was like, hey, I really wish that there was more decks that were just kind of like built with a smaller card pool in mind. They championed going out of their way to do that. And so this one is exclusively using Black Widow, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box, and the core set. So if you have basically the topic of the day, you have the core set, and you have the new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box, you can build this deck. And I really wanted to go out of my way to build something off that because of all the preparations that we've seen. And actually, because of that, I think this will probably be pretty quick, because we've already talked about the important cards, all the preparations out of her deck. So let's just run this down real quick. We got Agent Coulson. He is a ally that costs 3, comes into play, and is shield and spy traded. But when he comes into play, you search your deck and discard pile for a preparation card and add it to your hand. Shuffle your deck. In this deck, because we play with so many preparations, that's so important to what we're trying to do. He is going to be crucial to just taking everything that we want to do and making something of it, just adding some consistency that Black Widow's not necessarily really looking for. She is not one of those heroes that's like, oh, I really wish that I had more consistency. She is a very consistent hero, but he just adds an extra layer of consistency. Being able to have that one card that goes and searches you for a preparation is awesome. Obviously, we've also got her alter ego action, the safe house, that's going to be able to take them out of your discard pile. But overall, just one of the stars of this deck. And we've got a new card, Melissa May, who is so new that we don't even have the art on Marvel CDB yet. But she's a 4-cost ally with 2 attack, 2 thwart, 3 health, shield, and spy traded. And when Melinda May uses a basic power, look at the top card of the encounter deck, you may discard that card. So this is just a way to, one, in my write-up I wrote that she's kind of a mini global logistics, an event we'll get to in just a second. But just being able to look at the top card of the encounter deck and really say, like, are these boost icons something that I'm concerned about? Or I've got a confused, or I've got a stun status on the villain. So this isn't actually going to be what the boost icons are for. Is this a treachery, or is this an encounter card that I'm concerned about? She can help you to mitigate that and really say, like, is this card worse than any other card I could draw from the encounter deck? And you can evaluate that. And like I said earlier, Black Widow is a character that definitely rewards knowledge of the game, rewards some forethought, and this is just one of those cards that is going to help you to do that. So even if you're a new player, this is going to help you sort of ease into understanding how to kind of use your shield intelligence to counteract what the deck is doing. Then we've got Mockingbird, who is just a core set staple and I think works here. And because she's shield traded, that also helps with global logistics. Like I said, a card we're going to talk about in just a second. But when she enters play, she stuns an enemy and costs 3, got her 1 thwart, 1 attack, 3 health, all that stuff. probably a card that you've seen before, but overall, just adding that stun effect to an enemy can be helpful. It's kind of been outclassed nowadays, but I think that it has its value. Then we've got Nick Fury. If you really want to be saucy, maybe you want to grab Nick Fury Jr. from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box. But once again, just another staple. He comes into play, costs 4, and when he enters play, you choose to either remove 2 threat from a scheme, draw 3 cards, or deal 4 damage to an enemy. And at the end of the round, if Nick Fury is still in play, discard him. Once again, just a basic staple. Not necessarily something that I would put into some of my more larger card pool decks, but when you're working with a smaller card pool, this is a card that might as well be, in the deck regardless. And nothing wrong with him. He's a great card. Winter Soldier, got Covert Ops. Then we got the Global Logistics, which, okay. Okay. It came out of Sinister Motives, that's why I didn't draw it up. Okay, but either way, Global Logistics, event, shield, tactic, and you exhaust 1 shield card you control. You've got plenty of shield cards in play, or shield cards in the deck, so you should be able to do this. Now, you can even do this with your alter ego. But then you look at the top 4 cards of the player deck or the encounter deck, discard any number of those, and put the others on top and or the bottom of the deck in any order. So this is just a nice way to say, I'm just not going to be concerned with these cards, or I don't want to see this card, or I would rather put this on the bottom because maybe we won't even get to the bottom of the encounter deck. Or if you're doing it with your own deck, how do you set up your next draw? It's cards you don't need, they're not going to be helpful. Cards you'd like to have but you don't need next turn. This is just one of those rewards you for playing and rewards you for thinking ahead kind of cards. And like I said, we've got the shield cards in play to really take advantage of this. Then we've got the basic resources. I did not see any reason to. Well, one, I don't think we have too many other we don't have too many other resources available. But like the Power of Justice was not really needed here because we don't have a lot of expensive cards. In fact, that costs enough. Yeah, we've got Agent Coulson. Counterintelligence and Under Surveillance are really the only cards in the deck that cost more than 1. So having the Power of Justice is not needed. And then we've got an Interrogation Room. Another core set card is a location and a support. And after you defeat a minion, exhaust Interrogation Room, remove 1 threat from the scheme. So just helping out in that way, just being that extra bit of removal. We are not worried about, because we don't have Monica Chang. So we're not worried about the what are they called? You has the snoop counters and everything. Surveillance team. We're not running the surveillance team, and we don't have Monica Chang to be able to run that combo. So this is kind of the substitution for that. Sky Destroyer. Again, this probably also came out of Sinister Motives. So either way, this is a basic shield support. Cost 3, and when you play a shield card, exhaust Sky Destroyer, deal 2 damage to an enemy. So this is just going to be super helpful to do exactly what you need to do. Break some toughs, just take out some minions. Anyway, this is just a good card to have, and I'm happy to see that you got a reprint Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. so that more people can have it. Counterintelligence, which was the card that I commented on earlier, combos really well with the Safe Room. Came out of Black Widow pack, and it is a preparation skill, max 1 per player, and when any amount of threat would be placed on the main scheme, discard counterintelligence, prevent 3 of that threat. So, like I said with the Safe Room, this just allows you to basically blank the villain's scheming pretty well. And if you are in a situation like in multiplayer, where more than 1 threat is going to be added to the average main scheme, this can just kind of negate the first step of the villain phase where a bunch of threat gets placed on it. Either way, good card, nice to have, nice to recur. And if you're playing with Black Widow, that means that you're preventing threat from being added, and you're also dealing the damage, which is nice. Informant, which is a new card out of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is max 1 per player, it's preparation again, and interrupt. When a minion schemes, discard Informant. Its activation removes 1 threat instead of placing it. So I learned my lesson over the weekend playing with this card, that even if you are working with a minion whose scheme is 1, that is still making a difference, and you should consider it. Like, any amount of scheme being removed instead of being added is beneficial, and waiting for that 2 scheme minion or that 3 scheme minion, I don't even know if there's a 3 scheme minion, probably like Loki or something, but waiting for a big amount is not as important as just counteracting what the minions are doing in the first place. Practice plan, which I think this came out of the Black Widow pack. This is an entirely new card. I guess when I talked about it last week for my opening, I thought this was a card we'd seen before. Wow, okay, did not know that. So it is a 0 cost preparation. After you discard a preparation card you control, discard Practiced Plan, return that card to your hand from your discard pile. So this is just another way to recur preparations. I thought it was great, and that was with no experience. I could have sworn this was a card that I'd played with before, and apparently it is not. In a deck that has as many preparations as we have, this is going to be super helpful. So, you have it. If you have the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box, use it. Oops. Then we've got too many screens. Prism Dust. This is we talked about this just briefly before. Similar to the Widow's Bite. So it is a preparation, max 1 per player. It's preparation tech. After a minion enters play, discard Prism Dust, confuse that minion, and deal 2 damage to it. So I think this is great. I think this is going to be really fun, especially in a world with the vulnerable trait. So when a minion with vulnerable gets stunned or confused, you just discard them. So this is going to be a nice way to get rid of those within the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. box. And hopefully going forward, we'll see some minions like that. But even if it's just confusing a minion so that they can't scheme later and dealing 2 damage, it's very similar to Informant. Any form of preventing scheming is a good way of preventing scheming. And then last card is Under Surveillance. This is a reprint. We've seen it before. This is stronger in solo than it is in multiplayer, but either way, it is an upgrade that comes down, it attaches to the main scheme, and it raises the target threat value of the attached scheme by 4. Like against Rhino as an example, you're fighting against him, his main scheme is 7, now it's 11. You get that extra breathing room. In multiplayer, this is still helpful because it can give you an extra turn, and sometimes an extra turn is all you need to kind of turn the tide. And overall, I think this is a great card, and we've got one of because you can only really use one of them, and maybe it's not going to be helpful and it's just going to be a glorified energy resource, but either way, love this card and put it into your decks. But that is it. Let's go talk about the Obligation and Nemesis kit. All right, and we are back to talk about the Nemesis and the Obligation. So let's get right into the Obligation, which is Burn Notice. Give to the Natasha Romanoff player. You may flip to Alter Ego form, choose Exhaust Natasha Romanoff, remove this card from the game, or discard the preparation card you control with the highest cost. If you cannot, this card gains Surge. Discard this Obligation. So pretty run-of-the-mill. Either you are exhausting or you are playing against your main game plan. And for the most part, I don't really see anything too evasive about this. Preparation cards are all pretty inexpensive. Just with her kit, you're looking at a maximum of 2. Everything else is 1. And there are obviously cards from her deck that you could play out of Aspect that might cost more than that. But for the most part, I'm not too concerned about this card. Unfortunately, you can't Grappling Hook it away because it's an Obligation, but it's not offensive. I think it does what it's supposed to do. It's either supposed to be a hang up for your hero, or it's just supposed to set you back in terms of what your deck is trying to do, and it does that fine. Then we've got Taskmaster, and as always, let's look at his side scheme while we're at it. So Taskmaster is a minion with 0 scheme, 0 attack, and 4 health. Seems pretty easy to defeat. Let's read his card. He has the Hydra and Elite trait, and Taskmaster gets +1 scheme, +1 attack for each upgrade you control. As a reminder, preparations are upgrades, so he could be very beefy. I'm never too concerned about him, but he could come down and really be something that you need to get rid of immediately. Luckily, he does not have tough, so an attack for 4 is going to be enough to take him out. Additionally, he has a boost ability. For this activation, the villain gets +1 scheme, +1 attack for each upgrade you control. I think the way to handle Taskmaster just on the surface with just the minion is you want to defeat him after the encounter deck has already been shuffled so that he is not something to surprise you. I think he is much more deadly as his boost ability than he is as his minion. Obviously, your experience may vary. It is entirely possible that he will come down, he will be a 6 scheme, 6 attack, and you just do not have the option to deal damage to him, and you just need to throw a minion in front of him, although most Black Widow decks I can think of do not have a lot, you need to throw an ally in front of him. You don't have a lot of allies just sitting around, and God forbid you are an alter ego, and he just gets to scheme for a big number. So there is precedent for him being dangerous, but I think that he's far more dangerous as a surprise than as the minion. Then we got his side scheme, Killer for Hire. Comes in with 3 threat, and when revealed, place 1 additional threat here per player, and he has a boost icon. So, this is going to come in with 4 to 6 threat on it, maybe 7 threat on it. I don't feel too concerned about it. It's pretty basic. It's not even really playing into what Taskmaster's trying to do. It's just kind of a speed bump. Unlike modern side schemes where, like, when defeated, go find a Hydra minion and put it into play or whatever. Like, it can be more dangerous. We saw even just last week when we were looking at Nick Fury and Maria Hill stuff, from when this was recorded. Those side schemes are far more like intricate and you need to plan around them. This is just, hey, if you don't deal with this, it's gonna just increase the scheming of the villain, and you probably want to deal with it. Then we've got 2 copies of Hydra Mercenary. This is just a reprint. We've seen it before in other modular encounter sets. It's just a 0 scheme, 1 attack Hydra minion with 3 health and guard. So it's just a speed bump. It's just something to get through. There's not a whole lot to necessarily be worried about. In fact, whenever you draw it, you can just yell out the flavor text. What is Hydra doing here? I appreciate when they put cards that you saw in the core set into different places. Like, you don't necessarily want to use this entire modular encounter set, so you just reprint a couple of the cards that you need. I appreciate that they do that. It just kind of it adds a little extra layer. And I mean, honestly, the other thing is that stuff from the core set doesn't, other than the standard or standard expert, doesn't get used so much that it's you don't use the encounter set that Hydra Mercenaries come out of that often. So are Hydra Mercenaries out of Claw? I'm not sure. They might be. I feel like the quote stands out because I feel like it's something you see in Rhino, but either way, it's a reprint. You've seen it before. And last card for the day is Deadly Shot. It is a treachery with, when revealed, alter ego, discard an upgrade you control and place 1 threat on the main scheme. And when revealed hero, discard an upgrade you control and take 1 damage. This is actually pretty benign. It's always dangerous when threat is being added at a weird time. So the alter ego side, although you're already kind of planning for the fact that the villain's going to be scheming if you're an alter ego. So there's that. But you can kind of prepare for damage. Extra threat is sometimes far more deadly. But at the same time, this is a pretty weak Nemesis set. There's not a whole lot to be concerned about. There are the outliers where Taskmaster is just going to be a beast and you need to handle him, and that's stopping everything. But for the most part, this is a pretty benign encounter set, and I think I can just be fine with that. All right, and that is Black Widow. I think she is an interesting hero. I'm happy that she's seeing more preparations, that her stock is changing. I realize I'm saying all this, and she is essentially a out-of-print hero. I don't know that she's necessarily out of print, but she's probably a tougher to find hero. But at the same time, if you are stumbling upon Black Widow, if you want to get Black Widow before the current legacy change happens, now that I realize this, I haven't done a new player guide since that announcement. Wow. But either way, if you do have some interest in her, she's a fun hero, and I think that she is worthwhile. And like I said, she's getting an infusion of new cards now, so there's excitement to be had. But until next time, I thank you for your time, and I will see you then. Bye.